The massive space station called Harmony Prime floated in the void between three star systems like a silver jewel against the black. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at its many ports, bringing delegates from across the galaxy to the quarterly meeting of the Galactic Council. The station hummed with activity as beings of all shapes and sizes moved through its corridors, discussing trade agreements, territorial disputes, and the thousand small matters that kept peace between the stars. Commander Jake Sullivan walked these same corridors with unhurried steps, his plain gray uniform marking him as a representative of Earth. Unlike the elaborate robes worn by the Altarian delegates or the ceremonial armor of the Corvan warriors, Jake's clothing was simple and practical. His calm blue eyes took in everything around him without seeming to stare, a skill he had learned during his years as humanity's voice in galactic politics. The main council chamber was a vast circular room with seats arranged in tiers, each delegation positioned according to ancient protocols that few beings still remembered the reasons for. Earth's small section sat in what most considered an unimportant corner, reflecting humanity's modest role in galactic affairs. Jake settled into his chair and activated his translation device. Though his natural talent for languages meant he rarely needed it, the session began with routine matters. Trade routes were approved, mining rights were distributed, and several minor territorial adjustments were ratified without much debate. Jake listened politely, occasionally making notes on his simple tablet, but his attention sharpened when the session turned to expansion requests. Warlord Zexthal of the Corvan Empire rose from his seat with dramatic flair. The massive reptilian being stood nearly 8 feet tall, his dark scales gleaming under the chamber's lights. Battle scars covered his arms and neck, each one a badge of honor in Corvan culture. His voice boomed across the chamber as he began his presentation. "Honored delegates," Zexthal declared, his words carrying the authority of one accustomed to being obeyed. The Corvan Empire requests expansion rights to 7 uninhabited star systems in the Outer Rim territories. These systems contain valuable resources that could benefit all council members through increased trade and prosperity. Jake's expression remained neutral as he watched the presentation, but something cold flickered in his eyes when Zexthal displayed his star charts. One of those 7 systems was very familiar. The presentation continued with detailed resource surveys, population projections, and economic forecasts. Zexthal spoke with confidence, clearly expecting his request to be approved as a matter of course. The Corvan Empire was powerful and wealthy, with a military force that few species could challenge. Their expansion requests were rarely denied. When Zexthal finished his presentation and returned to his seat, several delegates rose to voice their support. The economic benefits were obvious, and the systems appeared to be empty space with valuable minerals and favorable conditions for colonization. It seemed like a straightforward approval until a thin, elderly voice spoke from the Altarian section. "If I may address the council," said Ambassador Veltar, rising slowly from his chair. The ancient Altarian was one of the oldest beings in the chamber, his pale blue skin marked with the intricate tattoos that showed his centuries of service to galactic peace. When he spoke, even the most powerful delegates listened with respect. "I have reviewed Warlord Zexthal's proposal with great care," Veltar continued, his voice carrying clearly despite its softness, "and I find that one of the requested systems contains a world that cannot be claimed." Zexthal's head snapped toward the Altarian delegate, his yellow eyes flashing with irritation. "All 7 systems are uninhabited according to our surveys. If there are primitive species present, they can be relocated or integrated into the Empire." Veltar shook his head slowly. "The 3rd system in your request contains Earth, the homeworld of humanity. This world falls under the protection of the ancient law that states clearly, never mess with Earth." A murmur ran through the chamber, as delegates turned to look at Jake, who remained seated calmly in his corner. Most beings had heard of the old law, though few understood its origins or importance. It was generally considered an outdated rule from a more primitive time. When the galaxy was less civilized and such protections were thought necessary, Zexthal's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. "With respect to Ambassador Veltar, that law was created centuries ago when the galaxy was a different place. The humans have shown themselves to be peaceful traders and researchers, not warriors requiring special protection. Surely such an ancient rule can be set aside. For the greater good of galactic prosperity. The law exists for good reason, Veltar replied firmly. Though he did not elaborate on what that reason might be, Jake finally rose from his seat, drawing the attention of the entire chamber. He was not particularly tall or imposing compared to many of the other delegates, but something in his bearing commanded respect. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. Earth has no desire for conflict with the Corvan Empire or any other power, Jake said simply. We ask only to be left alone to pursue our own interests in peace. The law that Ambassador Veltar mentions has served the galaxy well for many years. Zexfil stood again, his massive frame dwarfing the human delegate. Commander Sullivan, surely you understand that progress requires change. Your people have much to gain from joining the Corvan Empire. We offer protection, trade opportunities, and a chance to participate in the greater galactic community. We appreciate the offer, Jake replied with a slight smile that never reached his eyes, but Earth prefers its independence. The debate that followed was heated but brief. Several delegates spoke in favor of honoring the ancient law, while others argued for Zexfil's position that outdated rules should not stand in the way of progress. The Corvan warlord grew increasingly agitated as he realized the council was not automatically supporting his request. When the vote was called, the result was narrow but decisive. The council voted to deny Zexfil's expansion request, citing the protection of Earth under ancient galactic law. The warlord's face darkened with rage as the decision was announced. "This is foolishness," Zexfil snarled, his voice carrying across the chamber. The Corvan Empire will not be denied what is rightfully ours by the outdated fears of weak old beings and their primitive pets. He turned his yellow gaze directly on Jake, who met it without flinching. You hide behind ancient laws and the protection of others, human. Your people are merchants and scientists, not warriors. When the Corvan fleet comes for your world, your council friends will not be there to protect you. Jake stood slowly, his movement deliberate and controlled. For a moment, something flickered in his calm blue eyes, something that made several nearby delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. But when he spoke, his voice remained perfectly level. Earth wishes only to be left in peace, Warlord Zexfil. We hope you will respect the Council's decision. Zexfil laughed harshly and gathered his entourage. The Corvan Empire respects only strength, and I see none here. We will take what we need, with or without Council approval. As the Corvan delegation stormed from the chamber, Jake remained standing until they were gone. Then he calmly activated his personal communicator and sent a brief, coded message to Earth. The message contained only 3 words, but they would be understood by those who needed to understand them. Storm clouds gathering. The council session continued with other matters, but Jake's attention was elsewhere now. He sat quietly in his corner, appearing to take notes on routine trade discussions, but his mind was already far away. As the session finally ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Ambassador Veltar approached the human section. "Commander Sullivan," the elderly Altarian said quietly, "I fear the warlord will not heed the council's wisdom." Jake looked up at the ancient being who had supported Earth's position. "Some people have to learn lessons the hard way, Ambassador. We can only hope he chooses not to." Veltar studied the human's face for a long moment, seeing something there that others might miss. The galaxy has been peaceful for so long that many have forgotten why certain laws exist. "Perhaps it's better that way," Jake replied softly. "Peace is always preferable to the alternative." As Veltar walked away, Jake remained in his seat, watching through the chamber's massive windows as ships began departing from Harmony Prime. In the distance, he could see the distinctive wedge shapes of Corvan warships forming up into battle formation before jumping to hyperspace. Jake sighed quietly and closed his tablet. It had been a good day for galactic peace, but he suspected that peace was about to become much more complicated. He made his way back to the human diplomatic ship, already composing the full report he would need to send to Earth. Some storms could be weathered, but others required more direct action. As his ship prepared for the journey home, Jake hoped that Warlord Zexfel would reconsider his position. But hope was not the same as expectation, and Jake Sullivan had not survived 20 years of galactic diplomacy by relying on hope alone. 3 weeks passed since the Council meeting on Harmony Prime, and the galaxy continued its normal routine of trade and diplomacy. Merchant ships traveled their regular routes between worlds, carrying goods and passengers across the vast distances between stars. Research stations orbited distant planets, their crews studying everything from stellar phenomena to alien ecosystems. The great machinery of galactic civilization hummed along peacefully. But beneath the surface, changes were beginning to take shape. Captain Ryan Foster guided his merchant vessel, New Horizon, through the hyperspace lanes toward the Centauri trade hub. His cargo holds filled with Earth-grown coffee, chocolate, and various agricultural products that were prized throughout the galaxy. Ryan had been running trade routes for 15 years, and his friendly manner had earned him customers and friends on dozens of worlds. His ship was typical of human merchant vessels, appearing modest and unremarkable compared to the massive cargo haulers used by some species. The hyperspace jump ended smoothly, and Ryan's ship dropped back into normal space near the edge of human territory. The navigation display showed clear space ahead, with only a few other ships visible on the long-range sensors. Ryan was reviewing his delivery schedule when his communications officer, a young woman named Kelly, looked up from her station with a puzzled expression. "Captain, we're getting a signal from 3 ships that just dropped out of hyperspace behind us. They're identifying themselves as Corvin Empire vessels and requesting that we prepare to be boarded." Ryan frowned slightly and moved to the sensor station. The 3 ships were definitely Corvin design, sleek and aggressive-looking, with the characteristic weapon arrays that marked them as military vessels. They were much larger than his merchant ship and could easily overpower him if they chose to do so. "Open a channel," Ryan said calmly, settling into his captain's chair with the easy confidence of someone who had dealt with difficult situations before. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the lead Corvin ship. A heavily scarred warrior with the rank insignia of a ship commander stared back at him, his yellow eyes cold and hostile. "Human vessel, you will surrender your cargo and submit to inspection. Any resistance will be met with force." Ryan smiled warmly, as if he were greeting an old friend rather than someone threatening his ship. "Good afternoon, Commander. I'm Captain Ryan Foster of the merchant vessel New Horizon. I'd be happy to cooperate with any reasonable request, but I'm curious about the legal authority for this inspection." The Corvin commander's scarred face twisted with irritation. "The Corvin Empire claims authority over this sector. Your cargo will be confiscated as tribute." "I see," Ryan replied, still maintaining his friendly tone. "Well, I certainly don't want any trouble. You're welcome to come aboard and take whatever you need. Would you and your crew like some coffee while you're here? It's a fresh batch from Earth, and I always enjoy sharing it with new acquaintances." The Corvin stared at him in disbelief. Most merchant captains would be terrified or angry when faced with piracy, but this human seemed genuinely pleased to have visitors. The commander had expected threats, bribes, or desperate pleas for mercy, not an invitation for refreshments. "You will transfer your cargo immediately," the commander repeated, though he sounded less certain than before. "Of course," Ryan agreed cheerfully. "Kelly, please prepare the cargo bay for our guests and put on a fresh pot of coffee, the good stuff from the Colombian highlands." As the Corvin boarding party made their way to Ryan's ship, the captain activated a small device on his belt that would record everything that happened. The recording would later find its way to Earth through channels that the Corvins would never suspect. Meanwhile, hundreds of light years away, Dr. Emma Clark was conducting her daily research on the orbital station that circled the gas giant Kepler. Her work involved studying the complex ecosystem of organisms that lived in the planet's upper atmosphere, creatures that had evolved to float like jellyfish in the dense clouds. Emma had been stationed here for 2 years, and her discoveries had advanced xenobiology in ways that benefited the entire galactic scientific community. The research station was typical of human scientific outposts, appearing small and peaceful as it orbited the massive planet. Its communication arrays were powerful but seemed designed only for sending research data back to Earth and coordinating with other scientific stations. The small crew of 12 scientists and support staff went about their work with quiet dedication, seemingly unaware of any troubles in the galaxy. Emma was reviewing data from the morning's atmospheric probes when her assistant, a cheerful young man named Peter, brought her the daily communication summary. "Anything interesting from home?" Emma asked, not looking up from her data screens. "The usual," Peter replied casually. "Supply schedules, personnel updates, and a note that mining operations in the asteroid belt have been increased for routine maintenance." Emma nodded absently, her attention focused on the fascinating behavior patterns she was observing in the atmospheric organisms. She had no way of knowing that the routine maintenance message was actually a coded instruction that had been sent to every human outpost in the galaxy. On Earth itself, General Marcus Webb stood in the command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching displays that showed the positions of ships and installations throughout human space. The command center looked unremarkable, with simple workstations and basic equipment that appeared decades behind the technology used by more advanced galactic civilizations. But appearances could be deceiving, and General Webb knew exactly what capabilities lay hidden beneath the modest exterior. "Status report," Webb said to his aide, Colonel Sandra Hill. "Protocol 7 is now active across all sectors," Sandra replied, consulting her tablet. "Mining operations have increased output by 300%. Maintenance crews are working around the clock, and civilian vessels are adjusting their routes according to the new schedules." Webb nodded, his weathered face showing no emotion. He had hoped this day would never come, but preparations had been in place for decades. Every human in space knew their role, and every installation had been designed with multiple purposes in mind. At the edge of human space, Warlord Zexthal's fleet gathered in the empty system that would serve as their staging area for the assault. On Earth, the massive Corvan warships formed an impressive sight, their dark hulls bristling with weapons and their engines glowing with the promise of destruction. Zexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing intelligence reports from his scouts. "The humans show no signs of military preparation," his intelligence officer reported. "Their merchant ships continue normal operations and their research stations maintain regular schedules. Our scouts have detected only minimal defense installations around their homeworld." Zexthal smiled coldly, as expected. "They are traders and scientists, not warriors. Their peaceful nature will be their downfall." The warlord studied the tactical displays showing Earth's system. The planet appeared to be protected by a small number of orbital defense platforms and a modest fleet of ships that seemed designed more for patrol duties than serious combat. Intelligence suggested that the human military was focused on maintaining order rather than fighting wars, which made sense for a species that had never faced a serious threat. "How long until the fleet is ready to advance?" Zexthal asked. 2 days, my lord. All ships will be fully supplied and ready for the assault." Zexthal nodded, already imagining the easy victory that awaited him. The humans would surrender quickly once they realized the futility of resistance, and Earth would become another jewel in the Corvan Empire. The galaxy would see that ancient laws meant nothing when faced with superior strength. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Grant stood in her office overlooking the sprawling complex of Earth Defense Headquarters. Through her window she could see what appeared to be a normal day of peaceful activity. Ships moved in orderly patterns between the orbital stations, construction crews worked on civilian projects, and the great city below bustled with the daily life of billions of humans. But Admiral Grant knew that beneath this peaceful surface, humanity was quietly preparing for war. Every civilian transport was actually a military vessel in disguise. Every construction crew was actually a weapons team installing hidden defenses. Every peaceful research station was actually a monitoring post that had been watching and analyzing potential threats for decades. The Admiral activated her personal communicator and sent a brief message to her fleet commanders. Storm protocols. Now in effect, prepare for thunder. Across human space, the message was received and understood. Ships that had appeared to be simple merchants began revealing their true nature as their hidden weapon systems came online. Mining platforms that had seemed to be extracting valuable minerals were actually massive defense installations that had been disguised for years. Research stations that had appeared to be studying distant stars were actually sensor networks that could track enemy movements across dozens of light years. Captain Ryan Foster finished loading coffee and supplies onto the Corvan ships, maintaining his friendly demeanor even as the pirates took most of his cargo. The Corvan commander seemed confused by the humans' continued politeness and generosity. The Corvan fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Warlord Zexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical displays as his sensors began mapping the human home system. What he saw matched perfectly with his intelligence reports: a single star with several planets, a modest asteroid belt, and what appeared to be minimal defensive installations. "Scan for military targets," Zexthal ordered, his yellow eyes gleaming with anticipation. His sensor officer worked quickly, highlighting contacts throughout the system. "My lord, I detect approximately 30 orbital defense platforms around the third planet, along with what appears to be a small patrol fleet of perhaps 50 vessels. There are also numerous civilian installations and mining operations throughout the system." Zexthal nodded with satisfaction. His own fleet numbered over 200 warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything the humans appeared to possess. This would indeed be the easy victory he had promised his warriors. "Begin the attack," he commanded. "Target the orbital defenses first, then move in to demand surrender." The massive Corvan fleet surged forward into the system, their engines leaving brilliant trails in space as they accelerated toward Earth. On dozens of bridges, Corvan warriors prepared for what they believed would be a brief and glorious battle against an inferior enemy. Lieutenant Sam Parker sat in the cockpit of his fighter, watching his instruments as the enemy fleet approached. At 23 years old, Sam was one of the youngest pilots in Earth's defense force, but his calm demeanor showed no trace of fear or uncertainty. Around him, his squadron of 12 fighters moved in loose formation, appearing to patrol the outer edge of the system without any sense of urgency. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, Sam's wingman Kelly reported over the radio. "Looks like our guests have finally arrived." "Copy that," Sam replied casually. "Command, this is Falcon Squadron. We have visual on approximately 200 enemy vessels entering the system." The response from Earth Defense Command was equally calm. "Acknowledged. Falcon Squadron. Proceed with standard patrol pattern and observe enemy movements." Sam smiled slightly as he adjusted his fighter's course. The standard patrol pattern was anything but standard, and his squadron's apparent casual response to an overwhelming enemy force would soon make sense to the Corvans in ways they would not enjoy. On the command deck of Earth's primary orbital station, Chief Engineer Tony Martinez monitored the approaching enemy fleet with professional interest. Tony had spent 15 years building and maintaining the defense installations that protected Earth, and he knew every system better than his own apartment. The Corvans would see exactly what he wanted them to see, nothing more and nothing less. "There." "Taking the bait?" Tony reported to Commander Beth Rogers, who stood beside him watching the tactical displays. "Enemy fleet is moving directly toward our outer defense line, just as predicted." Beth nodded, her experienced eyes tracking the enemy movements. She had fought in border skirmishes and pirate raids throughout her career, but this would be her first major fleet action. The responsibility of coordinating Earth's defense weighed heavily on her shoulders, but years of preparation had made her ready for this moment. "All stations report ready," she announced to the command center. "Outer perimeter is green across." "The board?" The Corvan fleet continued its advance, and as they drew closer to the orbital defense platforms, their sensors began detecting more detailed information about human capabilities. What they saw continued to match their expectations. The platforms appeared to be simple weapon stations with basic shields and limited firepower. The human patrol fleet seemed to be pulling back toward Earth rather than advancing to meet the threat. The humans are retreating, Zextel's tactical officer reported with satisfaction. Our approach has caused them to abandon their outer defenses. Zextel studied the displays, noting how the small human ships were falling back in apparent disorder. Some appeared to be fleeing toward Earth, while others seemed to be trying to hide behind asteroids in the outer belt. It was exactly the kind of panicked response he had expected from a peaceful species facing overwhelming force. "Begin bombardment of the orbital platforms," he ordered. "Show these humans the futility of resistance." The Corvan fleet opened fire with a devastating barrage that lit up space with brilliant flashes of energy. Their massive guns targeted the orbital defense platforms, which appeared to crumble under the assault. Explosions bloomed against the black void as platform after platform was destroyed or disabled. Within minutes, the outer defensive line that had protected Earth for decades seemed to be in ruins. Sam Parker watched the destruction of the defense platforms with detached interest, knowing that what the Corvans were destroying were mostly empty shells and decoy installations. The real platforms remained hidden and would reveal themselves when the time was right. His fighter squadron continued its apparent retreat, drawing the enemy fleet deeper into the system. "They're really buying this," Kelly commented over the radio as another decoy platform exploded in spectacular fashion. "Tony always did have a talent for special effects," Sam replied, pulling his fighter into what looked like an evasive maneuver, but was actually part of a carefully planned movement pattern. The Corvan fleet pressed forward, encouraged by their easy success against the outer defenses. As they advanced past the asteroid belt, their sensors detected more human installations that appeared to be mining operations and cargo stations. These civilian targets seemed to be defenseless, and several Corvan commanders requested permission to destroy them as examples of Corvan power. "Ignore the civilian installations for now," Zextel commanded. "We will deal with them after Earth surrenders. Focus on military targets." What Zextel did not realize was that the civilian installations his fleet was ignoring were actually some of the most heavily armed platforms in human space. The asteroids they were flying past had been hollowed out and converted into weapon stations decades ago. The mining ships that seemed to be fleeing in panic were actually disguised destroyers, waiting for the right moment to reveal their true nature. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez watched the enemy fleet move deeper into the system, noting their positions relative to the hidden installations. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned, and soon the Corvans would learn the first lesson about human military doctrine. Appearances could be very deceiving. "Enemy fleet is now within range of the inner belt installations," Tony reported to Commander Rogers. "All platforms report ready for activation." Beth studied the tactical display, watching as the Corvan fleet spread out in what they believed was a dominant formation. They had positioned themselves perfectly for what was about to happen, and their confidence would soon become their weakness. "Lieutenant Parker," she said into her communicator, "you and your squadrons are cleared to begin the demonstration." Sam smiled as he received the order. "Copy that, Command. Time to show our guests what Earth hospitality really looks like." He signaled to his squadron, and 12 fighters that had appeared to be retreating in disorder suddenly changed course with precision that no civilian pilot could match. Their weapon systems came online as hidden armor plating slid away to reveal military-grade equipment. What had looked like simple patrol craft were now clearly revealed as advanced fighters designed for space combat. "This is Falcon Squadron," Sam announced over an open channel that the Corvans would certainly be monitoring. "Welcome to Earth Solar System. We hope you enjoy your stay." The asteroid belt around the Corvan fleet suddenly came alive with activity. Massive weapon batteries emerged from concealed positions as asteroids split open to reveal the military installations hidden within. Mining ships shed their disguises as weapon ports opened along their hulls. What had appeared to be a peaceful asteroid belt was actually a fortress that had been decades in the making. The Corvan fleet found themselves surrounded by gun platforms that had materialized seemingly from empty space. Sensor contacts that had been ignored as space debris were now revealed as weapons that could destroy capital ships. The trap that had been carefully prepared was finally sprung. "What is this?" Zextel demanded, staring at displays that showed enemy contacts appearing throughout his formation. Where did these installations come from? His sensor officer worked frantically to update the tactical picture. "My lord, we are detecting massive energy signatures from throughout the belt. The asteroids appear to be artificial constructions, and the mining vessels are actually warships." The first barrage from the hidden platform struck the Corvan fleet with devastating effect. Ships that had been confident in their superiority found themselves under attack from directions they had never expected. The careful formation that had seemed so impressive moments before was now a liability as ships struggled to maneuver while under fire from multiple angles. "Commander." Rogers watched the battle unfold from her command center, coordinating the attack with the precision that came from years of planning. Each weapon platform had been assigned specific targets, and the timing of their reveal had been calculated to maximize confusion and damage to the enemy fleet. "First phase is complete," she reported to. The battered Corvan fleet limped toward Earth's moon, their formation ragged and their confidence shattered. Warlord Zextel stood on his damaged bridge, staring at the blue and white marble that hung in space before him. Nearly half his ships had been destroyed or crippled in the asteroid belt, and his remaining vessels bore the scars of a battle he had not expected to fight. But Earth still lay within his grasp, and he refused to believe that a species of peaceful traders could defeat the mighty Corvan Empire. "Damage report," Zextel demanded, his voice harsh with anger and pain from wounds he had sustained when his flagship took a direct hit. 97 ships remaining in fighting condition." "My lord," his tactical officer replied, trying to hide the fear in his voice. 43 more are damaged but operational. We have lost contact with 62 vessels." Zextel's clawed hands gripped the rail of his command platform until the metal groaned under the pressure. He had begun this campaign with over 200 ships, expecting an easy victory against a weak enemy. Now he faced the humiliating possibility of defeat at the hands of beings he had dismissed as harmless merchants and scientists. "The humans used deception and trickery," he snarled. "They hid their weapons like cowards instead of facing us in open battle. But they cannot hide their homeworld, and we still have enough ships to burn their cities to ash." Admiral Lisa Grant stood in the primary command center buried beneath Earth's surface, watching the tactical displays that showed the approaching enemy fleet. Around her, dozens of officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency, coordinating the defense of humanity's homeworld. The command center had been designed to survive anything short of a direct planet-killer weapon, and from here Admiral Grant could control every aspect of Earth's military forces. "Enemy fleet is approaching lunar orbit," reported her communications. "Officer, they appear to be regrouping for a final assault." Admiral Grant nodded, her experienced eyes studying the enemy formation. The Corvans had been bloodied but not broken, and they still possessed enough firepower to cause serious damage if they were allowed to reach Earth's surface. But the asteroid belt had been only the first layer of Earth's defenses, and the real surprises were yet to come. "Open a channel to the enemy flagship," she ordered. "Let me speak to their commander." The main display flickered to life, showing the scarred bridge of the Corvan command ship. Warlord Zextel stood amid smoke and sparks, his reptilian features twisted with rage and determination. Behind him, Admiral Grant could see Corvan warriors working frantically to repair battle damage. "I am Admiral Lisa Grant of the Earth Defense Force," she said, her voice calm and professional. "Warlord Zextel, you have attacked a peaceful world. without provocation and suffered heavy losses as a result. I'm prepared to offer you one final opportunity to withdraw your forces and depart our system unharmed. Zexthal's yellow eyes blazed with fury as he stared at the human woman who dared to offer him terms. You think your tricks in the asteroid belt have won you victory? I still have enough ships to reduce your world to rubble. Surrender now, and I will allow some of your people to live as slaves. Admiral Grant's expression did not change, but something cold flickered in her dark eyes. I see. Colonel Johnson, are your teams ready? Standing by, Admiral, came the reply from somewhere off-screen. Warlord Zexthal, Admiral Grant continued, you have made your choice. I regret that you have chosen to learn this lesson the hard way. The transmission ended, and Zexthal found himself staring at a blank screen. The human admiral's calm confidence disturbed him more than threats or insults would have, but he pushed the feeling aside. Earth lay before him, and nothing would stop him from claiming his victory. All ships prepare for final assault, he commanded. Target the orbital installations and population centers. Show these humans the price of defying the Corvan Empire. Colonel Pete Johnson crouched in the cargo bay of a small stealth ship, checking his equipment one final time. Around him, 23 other members of Earth's Special Operations Forces made their own preparations with quiet efficiency. Their mission was simple in concept but deadly in execution. Board enemy command ships and eliminate their ability to coordinate the attack. 2 minutes to insertion, the pilot announced over the comm system. Pete nodded to his team, men and women who had trained for years for this exact type of operation. Their ship was invisible to Corvan sensors, and their equipment was designed to function in the vacuum of space. What they were about to attempt would have been considered suicide by most military forces, but Earth's special operations teams had been preparing for this possibility since the first humans left their homeworld. The Corvan fleet began its advance toward Earth, unaware that dozens of tiny stealth craft were moving through their formation like ghosts. The enemy ships maintained tight formation as they approached what they believed would be their final battle, but their focus on the planet ahead blinded them to the threats moving among them. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, watching the enemy fleet approach through the tactical displays. Her ship was one of 12 massive vessels that had been hidden behind Earth's moon, their presence concealed by both advanced stealth technology and the simple fact that the Corvans had not expected to face ships of this size and power. All stations report ready for combat, her weapons officer announced. Maria nodded, her hand steady as she prepared to reveal the true strength of Earth's naval forces. The Retribution was 3 times the size of the largest Corvan warship, and its weapon systems represented the pinnacle of human military technology. Beside her, 11 other dreadnoughts waited for the order to emerge from hiding and join the battle. The Corvan fleet had barely passed the moon when Earth's real defenses finally revealed themselves. The Luna defense grid came online in a blaze of energy that lit up space like a miniature star. Weapon emplacements that had been built into the moon itself opened fire with devastating effect, their massive guns designed to destroy capital ships with single shots. What is that? Zexthal demanded as his sensors detected the enormous energy signatures emerging from the moon's surface. The moon appears to be fortified, my lord, his sensor officer replied in a shaking voice. I am detecting weapon installations across its entire surface. The Luna defense grid had been humanity's greatest engineering project, a network of weapons and sensors that turned Earth's natural satellite into the ultimate fortress. For 50 years, human engineers had hollowed out sections of the moon and filled them with weapons that could destroy fleets. The project had been so secret that most humans did not know it existed, but now its terrible purpose was finally revealed. The first barrage from the lunar weapons tore through the Corvan formation like a scythe through wheat. Ships that had survived the asteroid belt were vaporized in seconds by beams of coherent energy that had been charged for hours in preparation for this moment. The careful formation that Zexthal had maintained dissolved into chaos as his captains tried desperately to evade weapons that seemed to track their every movement. Colonel Johnson's stealth ship reached the hull of a Corvan cruiser, and his team deployed into space with practiced precision. Their mission was to disable the ship's command structure and communications, preventing it from coordinating with the rest of the fleet. Similar operations were taking place throughout the enemy formation as Earth Special Forces demonstrated why boarding actions were considered a human specialty. Captain Santos received the signal she had been waiting for, and the Retribution emerged from behind the moon with its weapons already charging. Around her, 11 other dreadnoughts appeared like vengeful spirits, their massive hulls bristling with guns that had been designed for one purpose: the complete destruction of enemy fleets. "All ships, this is Admiral Grant," came the voice over the fleet communications system. "You are cleared to engage. Show them why we prefer peace." The human dreadnoughts opened fire with a coordinated barrage that made the lunar weapons seem like simple target practice. Each ship carried enough firepower to level continents, and their crews had trained for decades to use that power with surgical precision. The space around Earth became a storm of energy and explosions as humanity finally revealed the true extent of their military capabilities. Zexthel watched in horror as his remaining ships were systematically destroyed by weapons he had never imagined could exist. The humans had not just hidden their defenses, they had created an entire military doctrine based on deception and overwhelming force. Every assumption he had made about their capabilities had been wrong, and now his fleet was paying the price for his arrogance. "My lord, we must retreat," his tactical officer pleaded as another Corvan ship exploded under the concentrated fire of 3 human dreadnoughts. "No," Zexthel snarled, his pride refusing to accept defeat. "Target their planet directly. If we cannot conquer it, we will destroy it." But even as he gave the order, Colonel Johnson's team reached the bridge of his flagship. The Corvan guards were skilled fighters, but they had never faced humans in close combat. The boarding party moved through the ship like a force of nature, their training and equipment allowing them to overcome resistance that would have stopped. The Galactic Council chamber on Harmony Prime buzzed with shocked whispers and nervous conversations as delegates received reports from the battle at Earth. The massive circular room that had once echoed with confident debates about trade and territory now seemed smaller somehow, as if the very walls had drawn closer together in response to the terrible news that was spreading throughout the galaxy. Ambassador Veltar sat in his chair with the calm expression of someone who had lived long enough to see the same mistakes repeated countless times. The ancient Altarian had warned the council about the consequences of ignoring the old laws, but even he had not expected the demonstration to be quite so thorough. Around him, delegates from dozens of worlds struggled to understand how the Corvan Empire's mighty fleet had been completely destroyed in a matter of hours. Commander Jake Sullivan entered the chamber with the same unhurried steps he had always used, his plain gray uniform unchanged and his calm blue eyes revealing nothing of the events that had just transpired in his home system. He walked to Earth's modest section in the corner and took his seat as if this were just another routine council session, though every other delegate in the room watched his every movement with new understanding. The session was called to order by the council president, a tall being from the Centaurian Republic whose usual confidence seemed shaken by the reports he had been receiving. His voice carried a tremor that had not been there during previous meetings when he announced the emergency session's purpose. "The Council has received disturbing reports of a major fleet engagement in the Sol system." The President began, his words echoing in the unusually quiet chamber. "Warlord Zexthel of the Corvan Empire launched an unprovoked attack against Earth in direct violation of our previous resolution and ancient galactic law." A murmur ran through the chamber as delegates confirmed what many had already heard through unofficial channels. The Corvan fleet had been completely destroyed, with only a handful of ships allowed to escape and carry word of the defeat back to their home territories. The implications of this news were staggering for beings who had grown comfortable with the idea that military conflicts were small, limited affairs between roughly equal forces. Commander Sullivan rose from his seat when called upon to address the council. He walked to the central speaking platform with the same calm manner he had always displayed. But now every delegate understood that they were looking at a representative of the galaxy's most dangerous military power. "Honorable delegates," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "Earth regrets the necessity of the recent military action in our home system. We had hoped that Warlord Zexthal would heed the Council's wisdom and respect our desire to be left in peace." The simplicity of his words sent a chill through the chamber. Jake spoke of destroying an entire fleet as if he were discussing a minor inconvenience, and his casual tone made the demonstration of power even more terrifying. "The Corvan Empire attacked our world with over 200 warships," Jake continued, "and we responded as any species would when faced with extinction. We defended ourselves with the means at our disposal." A delegate from the Vegan Trade Federation stood up, his voice shaking as he asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Commander Sullivan, our intelligence reports suggest that Earth's military capabilities far exceed anything we had previously understood. How is this possible for a species we believe to be focused on peaceful trade and research?" Jake turned to face the questioner with a slight smile that never reached his eyes. "Earth has always been focused on peaceful trade and research, Ambassador. We prefer those activities to the alternatives. But preference and capability are different things entirely." Ambassador Veltar stood slowly, his ancient frame commanding the attention of the entire chamber. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries and the authority of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. "Perhaps it is time the Council learned the true history of the law that Warlord Zexthal chose to violate," Veltar said, his pale blue eyes scanning the assembled delegates. "The rule was not created to protect Earth from the galaxy, but to protect the galaxy from Earth." The chamber fell into complete silence as the implications of those words sank in. Delegates who had spent their careers navigating the complex politics of galactic civilization suddenly realized that they had been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of the power structures that governed their universe. 3 centuries ago, Veltar continued, humanity emerged from their homeworld and began expanding across the stars with a speed and efficiency that terrified every established power. They conquered 12 star systems in their first decade of space travel, and their military technology advanced faster than any species had thought possible. Jake listened to the history lesson with patient attention, neither confirming nor denying the ancient ambassador's words. His silence was more eloquent than any speech could have been. "The human galactic war lasted only 18 months, Veltar said, his voice growing stronger as he recounted events that most delegates had never heard described in such detail. "In that time, humanity defeated the combined fleets of 7 major powers and established themselves as the dominant military force in known space. Their ships could appear anywhere without warning. Their soldiers could board and capture vessels that seemed impregnable, and their strategic thinking operated on levels that no other species could match." The chamber remained silent as delegates struggled to reconcile this history with their understanding of humans as peaceful traders. The cognitive dissonance was almost overwhelming for beings who had grown comfortable with their assumptions about galactic power structures. "But then," Veltar continued, "humanity did something that no conquering species had ever done before. They stopped. They withdrew their fleets to Earth, released their conquered territories, and offered to establish peaceful relations with everyone they had defeated. The only condition was that they be left alone to pursue their own interests, without interference." Jake finally spoke, his voice carrying a note of sadness that had not been there before. "War is wasteful and destructive. We had proven our point and achieved our objectives. There was no need to continue the killing. The galactic law was established as part of the peace treaty," Veltar explained. "Never mess with Earth. It was humanity's way of ensuring that they would not be forced to resume their expansion, and our way of acknowledging that some powers are better left undisturbed." A delegate from the Corvan Republic, one of the few survivors of the recent battle, stood with visible effort. His wounds from the engagement were still healing, and his voice carried the weight of personal experience with human military capabilities. "What Happened to Warlord Zextal? He asked quietly. Jake turned to face the Carven delegate with an expression of genuine sympathy. He is alive and unharmed, though his pride has suffered considerable damage. He is currently aboard one of our ships, learning about the events that led to the establishment of the galactic law he chose to ignore. Admiral Lisa Grant stood in her office on Earth, looking out at the orbital installations that were already being restored to their peaceful configurations. The weapons that had devastated the Corvan fleet were being powered down and concealed once again, returning to their role as research stations and communication platforms. The transformation was so complete that within days, no casual observer would be able to tell that the most decisive military engagement in recent galactic history had taken place here. Status report, she said to her aide, Colonel Sandra Hill. All combat units have returned to standby configuration, Sandra replied, consulting her tablet. Prisoner operations are proceeding smoothly, and the surviving Corvan personnel are being treated according to galactic conventions. Reconstruction of damaged installations is ahead of schedule. Admiral Grant nodded, already thinking about the long-term implications of what had happened. Earth had been forced to reveal capabilities that they had hoped to keep hidden for many more years, and the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. What about the Corvan territories? She asked. The Corvan Republic has formally requested our assistance in maintaining order following the loss of their military leadership. Ambassador Shun is working with their civilian government to establish a transition plan that will prevent chaos in their systems. The Admiral smiled slightly at the irony. Earth had destroyed the Corvan fleet to protect itself, and now they were being asked to help rebuild the civilization they had defeated. It was a pattern that had repeated itself throughout human history, and one that she hoped would continue to define humanity's role in galactic affairs, Commander Sullivan concluded his address to the Galactic Council with words that would be remembered for generations. Earth hopes to return to our previous peaceful existence. We have no desire for conquest or expansion, and we ask only to be left alone to pursue our own interests. But the galaxy should understand that the law exists for good reasons, and those reasons have not changed. As Jake returned to his seat, every delegate in the chamber understood that the balance of galactic politics had fundamentally shifted. Earth was no longer the quiet backwater world that could be safely ignored in the